Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the teleconference for February 4th, 2021. We'll first have the library's Facilities Financing Authority Board meeting. That'll start at 9, and then we'll transition to the Library Joint Powers Authority Board meeting at about 9:15. These meetings will run back to back. To join this webinar using a telephone only, dial any of the following numbers. I'll read two of them aloud. 1-888-788-0099 or 1-833-548-0282, and then slowly enter the webinar ID of 945-0715-6448. As an attendee, your microphone is muted for the entire presentation unless you follow the process for public comments. You do not need a microphone, camera, or a screen if you only want to listen to this meeting, as it is available by landline or mobile phone. If you need assistance, please call the library's telephone information line at 1-831-427-7713. The board will take public comments as outlined in the posted agenda and in the next slides. All written comments must include the agenda item number and be received prior to the close of public comment on that agenda item. If you're joining by computer, you may use the Q&A feature to type your comments. On the attendee control bar near the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Q&A icon. You may also use the raise hand icon to raise your hand. The moderator will either call your name or announce the last 3 digits of your phone number when it is your turn. State your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes of speaking time. Down at the bottom of the Zoom control bar on the lower left corner, you'll see audio settings. Then in the middle, you'll see an icon for both raise hand and Q&A. If you're using a mobile device, the Q&A icon and raise hand icons likely appear near the top right corner of your screen, so it's in reverse. The upper left corner is leave meeting, and in the upper right corner are both icons. If you've called into this meeting using a telephone only, you may raise your hand by pressing *9 on your keypad. The moderator will announce the last 3 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to comment. Press *6 to unmute yourself. You will then have 3 minutes of speaking time. Alternatively, you may call the library's telephone information line to timely submit your comments at 1-831-427-7713. These will be read by the moderator. And finally, once the board meeting begins, if you're joining by computer, to see all of the panelists, you may need to use the Zoom control bar and select Gallery View. Depending on the size of your mobile device screen, you may need to scroll over to view whoever's speaking. If you're accessing this meeting via a Chromebook or the web browser only, you may not see all panelists at one time, only the panelists speaking. The chair of the board, Jamie Goldstein, will now call the meeting to order. We're transitioning to Gallery View. Please stand by. Jamie?
Good morning, all, and welcome to the Santa Cruz Library's Facility Financing Authority meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Director Tina Friend.
Here.
Director Carlos Palacios.
Here.
Vice Chair Martin Bernal.
Here.
Chair Jamie Goldstein.
Here. All right, do we have any additional materials this morning?
We do not.
Okay, and any additions and deletions to the agenda?
There is none.
Okay. Now is the time for oral communications. If anyone would like to address the library's Facilities Financing Authority on any item that's not on today's agenda, but within our subject matter purview, they're welcome to. Madam Moderator, do we have anyone on for oral communications?
Chair Goldstein, we do not.
Okay, that takes us to item 5 on our agenda, the Executive Director Report. Director Nimitz, do we have a report this morning?
We do have a report. It's actually been a very exciting time period for us and working on the many projects that we have going under Measure S. I want to say that APTOS, construction documents and permitting continues. We're likely to close the APTOS branch as we open Capitola. It does appear that we will be doing the grand opening for the Capitola branch in May of this year. Boulder Creek, the interior's been completely demolished. I included some photos. It's a thing to behold. And construction work is beginning. Grants of 40 is out to bid, and the City of Santa Cruz should sign a contract within the next 2 weeks. Capitola is quickly completing. There's also a picture of some of the artwork along the ceiling in the children's room in your packet, and it's turned out quite beautiful. We recently did an update to the Santa Cruz City Council about downtown. We're going to be letting 2 RFPs, one for a master architect and another for affordable housing developer to begin those projects, or that multi-use project. Garfield Park's contract was just signed, and we expect to begin construction on that by the end of February. La Selva Beach, we expect to get the keys to the building by the end of this week. We're preliminary planning an opening for the La Selva Beach Library for March 20th. Again, that opening will be tempered by COVID restrictions, but we're really excited to get the community in the building. Scotts Valley's made major progress. We are now trying to create a plan where we coordinate the earthquake retrofits for the building with some interior remodeling. That will likely happen in the fall of this year, and there will be a short closure for that building while we do all those important updates. But as you can see, a lot has been going on.
Definitely a lot. Thank you, Susan. Does anyone have any questions? All right. Any additions, comments by board members or additions to the project updates? Anyone have anything to add? All right. Thank you, Susan. That was a lot of great information, and it's really exciting to see all these projects moving ahead. I know we've been getting the updates forever, but finally in Capitola, at least we see the finish line ahead of us. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, the consent calendar. There's one item on today's consent calendar. Does anyone on the board want to pull something from consent? No. Anyone from the public? Moderator Jones?
Chair Goldstein, there are no comments at this time.
Okay. Do we have a motion on consent?
I'll move approval of the consent item 7A.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on a second. Can we have a roll call vote?
Director Friend,
Aye.
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Chair Goldstein.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to general business. And the first order of business we have today is the selection of a chair and vice chair for 2021. I think that there's a chair rotation schedule in the agenda packet. Staff, is there any information that we need that isn't in the packet?
No, just the rotation would be Martin Bernal from the City of Santa Cruz as chair, Tina Friend from the City of Scotts Valley as vice chair.
All right, thank you. Bring it back to the board. Do we have any discussion or nominations for the next chair?
I'll go ahead and nominate Martin Bernal for chair and Tina Friend for vice chair.
And I'll second that with my appreciation to Jamie for his very capable chairing in the past year.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Before we vote, let's just check to see if there's any public comment on this item.
Chair Goldstein, there are no public comments.
Okay. So seeing no public comment, let's take it to a roll call then.
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Bernal,
Yes.
Director Tina Friend.
Aye.
And with that, I am prepared to pass the gavel over to you, Director Bernal. Are you ready to run this meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll turn the mic over to you and mute myself.
All right. And I too thank you, Jamie, for getting us through the last year. It really was a transitional year with all this online webinar type business meetings. So thanks again. Okay, so let's move on. Next on our agenda is item 7B, which is a reimbursement resolution for the City of Santa Cruz Phase 3 funding. Do we have a staff report, Susan?
Downtown project as a multi-use project is quite complex. We've been working with our new project manager who really has to coordinate the library, the housing, and parking availability in the multi-use building. We've been looking at the timelines and what is achievable. Our original plan had been to bond for this summer for the last bond issuance. Based upon the timing of the project, we would like to issue that bond issuance for the summer of 22. As a result, there may be some shortfalls in the bond money available to the City of Santa Cruz. And what we're looking for with this language is the opportunity for the City of Santa Cruz to potentially cash flow if needed, but be repaid for any funding that they provide. We have Suzanne Harrell, who's our municipal advisor here, and we have Edith Driscoll, our treasurer, and either or both could probably articulate that better than I, but we feel it's important to have this flexibility only if necessary to move the final bond issuance forward in a timely way.
Are there any questions from board members?
I had a question. The Griffin Structures is actually the project management firm that we used in Watsonville when we built our new City Hall library and parking garage structures. And we had a great experience with them, and it turned out a very complex project, but it turned out very good. One of the things we did is we had a guaranteed maximum price contract with them, which was difficult to execute and to guarantee, but we ended up doing it. It was a structure, obviously because of the dangers of shortfalls in the budget. How are you dealing with the total cost of the project? And that's the only concern I would have in doing any of this is, these projects get really complex. And of course, I remember in the middle of our project in Watsonville, there was a shortage of iron or steel from China, and the price like quadrupled overnight, and suddenly the project budget was out of whack, and we couldn't get access to steel and all sorts of stuff. So in the end, we had to cut back the project in certain areas to make it work. But because they had a guaranteed maximum price and they guaranteed it with the bond, it actually put a strong incentive for them to control costs. I was just wondering, what is the structure of the relationship with Griffin Structures, and how are you going to work with the price guarantees, or are you going to work with them?
Carlos, I wish I had more expertise to speak confidently. I'll share what I know, and I'll do some research. We had originally hoped to do the downtown project as a design build project, which then would have required a guaranteed maximum price. I think with the complexity and multiple users, that we are moving away from that a little bit. So in the short run, the plan is to do a master architect, which will design all three aspects of the building. And the other piece was, no, I'm blanking. We had two RFPs going out. Oh, and for the housing developer, I think once we come to a full design, we will hire the construction company. And at that point, I think there is the opportunity to run the construction project more like you're talking about, more like a design build with a guaranteed maximum price. I think we're still in the phase, though, of trying to create a design within budget that 3 very separate entities can live with.
Yeah, I was going to add, go ahead, Susan.
No, I will ask that question of Griffin Structures, and I'd be happy to bring them back as well. But I feel, based upon what I do know, that it's too early in the process to determine that.
Yeah, I just want to say we're not at that stage yet, Carlos, where we have the design and we have the contract for the whole project yet in place. This is the preliminary work. So we're still at the preliminary work of doing the design of what the project will look like and the various components that go with it. So thus far, the council has approved the overall concept. We know we're going to have parking. We know we're going to have housing in the library. The library is probably the one that's the most probably refined as far as sort of knowing more of the scope of the project. But with respect to the parking and housing, that's Griffin is really the master project planner at this point. And then we'll get to that stage. And I imagine, yeah, we'll look at the various financing options, including what you just suggested. But yeah, we can have also Bonnie come back if there's particular questions as well. Any other questions? All righty. Do we have any members of the public, Ms. Jones, that would like to comment or speak on this item?
Chair Bernal, we do. Jean, go ahead. You may need to unmute yourself.
Okay, unmuted?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm glad that in Susan's description of the downtown library planning with Carlos' excellent question, I'm glad that the word budget was mentioned a few times, because I have an ongoing concern that every time there is anything in the media, news media, city council meetings, anytime where the budget of the library is discussed, we keep hearing the use of the original $27 million. In point of fact, the budget for the library is no longer, the available money is no longer 27 million, it's 25.5 million, because the city council allocated $1.5 million to Branciforte and Garfield. But we keep hearing 27 million. So we're not starting with 27 million and wondering what's going to happen if the price of steel goes up. We're starting with 25.5 million. And even with this process of Griffin Structures, that who are perfectly a good consultant. They're good. I think they're competent and capable of doing this, but somebody has to reiterate over and over again that it's 25.5 million, not 27 million, and that will matter as the next 2 years go forward. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of the public?
Chair Bernal, there are no additional public comments.
I just want to thank Suzanne and Edith for helping me through all of this.
All right, yeah, thank you, Edith, Suzanne. All right, is there a motion?
So I'll move approval of a resolution declaring intention to reimburse expenditures from the proceeds of bonds as recommended by staff.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple seconds. That's great. Okay, may we have a roll call?
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Director Goldstein,
Yes.
Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Aye. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 7C, which is LFFA Basic Financial Statements and Independent Auditors Report. Do we have a staff report?
Edith, would you like to talk through this?
Yes, although you cannot see me, I'm hoping you can still hear me. On your agenda today is the annual basic financial statements and independent auditors report. There is nothing unusual that I need to call to your attention, but I would just reiterate that we are doing this because the joint powers agreement requires that I, as the LFFA treasurer controller, prepare or cause to be prepared an independent audit. And I recommend approval of this item. I'm available if there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Edith. Are there any questions from board members? All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public that like to comment on this item?
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Okay, with that, is there a motion?
I'll move approval to accept and file the basic financial statements and independent auditors report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020 and related correspondence.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. May we take the vote, please?
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernard.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. With that, we have now moved on to the next item, which is the scheduled upcoming meetings, which are listed on the agenda. Next one is March 4th at 5 p.m. Are there any questions or comments on that? Okay. Next is item 10, which is adjournment. So thank you very much, and we'll move on to our next meeting.
And should I pick this one up at this point, Martine?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Jones, are we ready to go live with the Santa Cruz Libraries with our regular JPA meeting?
Chair Goldstein, go ahead.
All right. Unfortunately, it looks like I may have put together no, I'm sorry. Can we have well, let's note that the same members were present as during our last meeting, which will take us then to additional materials. Do we have any additional materials for our JPA board meeting?
I have included the library's financial dashboard from the City of Santa Cruz for the quarter ending December 2020.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any changes this morning to the agenda?
There are none.
All right. That takes us to item 4. So this is the opportunity for the public to make oral communications to this board regarding items that are not on today's agenda, but are within our subject matter authority. Do we have any oral communications this morning?
Chair Goldstein, we do. Jean, go ahead.
Good morning again. This is Jean Brocklebank. At the November Library Advisory Commission meeting, 2 members of the public expressed concern about the library system organizational chart, which usually appears in both your meetings and the Library Advisory Commission agenda packets. It's not in your packet today. The concern expressed in November was that the chart did not accurately reflect the JPA's 4th Amendment. Apparently, the commission and/or library staff responded by addressing that concern, and a newly reconfigured chart appeared in its January 25th meeting agenda packet. I was quite pleased to see it, especially since I could not attend the January meeting. It correctly showed the JPA's advisory body, the Library Advisory Commission, with dotted lines to both the JPA and to the library director. Imagine my shock to learn from someone after the November or the January meeting, JPA meeting, that the chart that was presented to the Library Advisory Commission at that meeting did not match the chart in the online agenda packet for that meeting. In other words, I looked at the online agenda packet for the meeting and was very pleased to see that they had corrected the error. But it turns out that they did not do that. And instead, they presented a different chart at the meeting. And I'm not suggesting that this was a violation of the Brown Act to have it in the online packet 72 hours ahead of time and then have a different one. But I am saying that this switch at the last minute did not serve the public well. The chart in the January meeting presented had no line from the commission, no line either dotted or solid connecting the Library Advisory Commission to the JPA. It showed only a solid line from the commission to the library director. This certainly does not accurately reflect the JPA's Fourth Amendment and the association of the commission as an advisory body to the JPA. I wrote to members of the commission's public participation subcommittee, which by the way is really good. Anyway, I wrote to them on January 27th and questioned how and why this happened. I've not yet heard back from them so far, so perhaps they will be able to clarify what happened in their report later to you today, or perhaps the library director can do so during her report. I hope this isn't too confusing and that it's clear that it is the organizational chart that must accurately reflect the commission's interaction with this, your board, with a line from the commission to your board in that chart. And you can't see the chart this time because it's not in your agenda packet. So
and Jean, you are, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Do we have any further public comment this morning?
Chair Goldstein, there are no additional comments this morning.
Okay.
Excuse me, I need to interrupt for a moment. Chair Goldstein, could you go back to item 3? It needs a report out from closed session of December 3rd, 2020.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. I didn't see it there under additions and deletions to the agenda. So this is a report out from the closed session that was held on December 3rd. The closed session was held on December 3rd, had one item listed on the closed session agenda, which was a public employee performance evaluation. The board met and discussed that performance evaluation and took no reportable action. Does that get us what we need there?
Yes, thank you very much.
Of course. Okay. So that's item 5, which is a report by library director. Director Nimitz, do we have a report this morning?
Hang on. We have so many things. If you'd like, I can quickly address Jean Brocklebank's issue. We ordinarily show the organization chart and approve it as part of the budgetary process. So we'll show it to you in May, approve it in June. There were some concerns by the public that the organization chart did not reflect our actual, or did not appropriately reflect our actual organization. We did make modifications to it late last year, but we had, and you'll see this from Chair Lindsay Bass, we had a sort of a finance workshop for the Library Advisory Commission. As part of that, we sent last year's budget packet. We did not modify last year's org chart from May and June with this new update. You know, it's not my practice to go back and modify approved documents from prior dates. So you will see the changes in that org chart in May and June as we move forward with this year's budget practice, or with budget approval process. But we did not go back and correct May and June's document. Just in terms of things going on to the library, we are in the purple tier. For us, that did not change very much in terms of our activities. Sorry, I'm having trouble trying to find the page. It did not change much in terms of our activities that we were providing in December and January. We'll have a more lengthy report on that by Assistant Director Eric Howard as we move forward. So I think I'll leave my comments till then.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. And yes, thank you for clarifying the organization chart. I know that that's usually something that's included in the budget cycle and updated at that time. So I'm glad that you took note of the previous comments and questions about the org chart. We will be updating it when the time comes. Okay, so that takes us to report by Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. Do we have a report this morning?
Martin Gomez is with us. Martin?
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to give you a quick update on activities of the Friends. I have 3 items very briefly. First off, I want to mention that we have hired a new operations manager who started on January 4th. Her name is Rebecca Scott. We're very pleased to have a new staff member to help with keeping the ship afloat in many ways, or keeping the clocks running on time. Welcome, Rebecca, to the organization. Second item is that I wanted to mention that you'll recall that we applied for a grant from the Monterey Peninsula Foundation. And I'm happy to report, well, first off, of that grant, it was a matching grant, dollar for dollar, up to $300,000 on their part. I'm happy to report that we have successfully met the match. January 30th or 31st was the end to receive any gifts that we to match that. So that means that we have successfully raised $300,000, and that $300,000 now will be $600,000 because of the matching program from the foundation. And specifically, I wanted to mention that that grant will go to the following locations: Garfield Park, Boulder Creek, and La Selva Beach. And the third thing I wanted to report on is that we have engaged with our consultant, our campaign manager consultant. The firm is called Essex and Drake, and we are in the very early stages of developing our strategy that will focus on 3 branches in phase 1. First, Garfield Park. Second, Branciforte, and Aptos. Those are all in phase 1, with plans for phase 2 coming in 2022. That completes my report.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on these, what's happening with the Friends of Santa Cruz Public Libraries? That's great news about the grant. Thank you so much for that update. Really terrific to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to item 7 on our agenda, which is a report by Library Advisory Commission. I think I've seen our Library Advisory Commission chair here on the meeting. Do we have a report this morning?
We do have a short report. Good morning, directors. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and share updates. The commission met on Monday, January 25th via Zoom teleconference, and at its meeting and in preparation for fiscal year 22 budget conversations that will take place in the coming months. The commission received foundational information on library finances from Director Nimitz, PMA Hennepin, and Assistant CAO Coburn. This is the financial workshop that Susan was referring to earlier. It was a very robust conversation that we had. We'll be following up on several of those questions in our subsequent upcoming meetings so that we are well positioned to provide good feedback and counsel to the library and to this board. Beyond this presentation, the commission discussed 2 key motions as part of its general business agenda, and I'll just provide a brief review of those 2 items. The first was the election of our 2021 officers. The commission elected me, the representative from Supervisor District 1 as chair, and Bruce Cotter, the representative from District 5 as vice chair. The representative voices of the full commission bring a real deep passion for and experience in the work and impact of our library system. And we're eager to provide sound feedback and advice on strategic issues for the governing board and library management that they will face in the coming year. Further, we hope to find ways to continue to recognize and support the tireless efforts of library staff as they continue to provide essential services despite the challenges of COVID-19. The second item that we discussed was a recommendation to improve public participation in commission meetings. We had a comment about that from a member of the public today. And our Dynamite subcommittee team of Commissioners Cotter and Dubin shared their recommended improvements for 3 areas: the commission webpage, agenda development, and public comment process during meetings. After discussion and feedback, public feedback, the commission unanimously to have Director Nimitz work with the subcommittee to review and implement as many of those recommendations as feasible, given the requirements of the Brown Act and limited staff capacity. And this concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Bass. Does anyone have any questions about the Library Advisory Commission activity? Okay. Seeing none, thank you for the report on all the great work. Looking forward to hearing updates in the future for the Library Advisory Commission. Are there any comments this morning from board members?
I have a few comments. I have comments of appreciation for the staff at the Scotts Valley branch. I have to say that in addition to all the other kind of background disasters we've been dealing with, they really stepped up when we had the debris flow and evacuations. So first of all, the Scotts Valley Library provides Wi-Fi services. And so everyone evacuated were coming down, staying in the parking lot and getting access to that vital service. And so that was really wonderful. We saw a lot of activity there. And then we also set up a temporary evacuation point at our community center in Scotts Valley. And when I was speaking to Susan some morning about it, and I was saying, yeah, we don't have Wi-Fi in the community center, so you can probably expect more traffic at the library. She said, let me see if we can get some hotspots over to you. So she did. Library staff brought over hotspots, they brought over charging stations, and it was just underscored how we have great collaboration and everyone's pulling together to support those really in the greatest needs. So thank you, Susan, and thank you to everyone at the Scotts Valley branch. And I also want to recognize Carlos and the county's handling of an extremely difficult week. Really pleased that we came through it the way we did. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you, Chair Goldstein.
Thank you, Director Friend. Are there any other comments this morning by board members? I find it such an interesting statement of the times that we're in, Tina, that we have background disasters, and that just becomes sort of a normal thing. Okay, that takes us to item 9 on today's consent. Today's agenda is the consent calendar. I see 6 items on consent. Does anyone from the board want to pull an item off the consent calendar? Seeing none, anyone from the public want to pull an item from consent?
Chair Goldstein, I do not see any intention to pull an item from consent.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar items 9A through F.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Director Friend,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Martin Bernard.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. We have an approved consent calendar. Takes us to item 10 on the agenda. The first order of business is item A, election of chair and vice chair for 2021. I think we all know that there's a rotation schedule, and I will turn it over to the board for deliberation and possible action.
I'd like to nominate Martine Bernal as chair and Tina Friend as vice chair for 2021.
We have a motion for it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Before we go to a vote, is there any public comment on this item?
Chair Goldstein, there are no public comments.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the board. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Chair Bernal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Friend.
Aye.
All right, and with that, I think I finally turn it over completely to you, Martine, for the rest of this meeting.
All right. Thank you for handling probably half the meeting. So thanks. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 10B, which is the library operational recommendations under COVID-19. So I'll see if there's a staff report from Director Nimitz.
Eric?
Or Eric's.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Tina was saying and Jamie was remarking on, it's been really a year of constant change. And so we are trying to juggle that and establish some stability at the same time. We went into a new service model beginning in November that was a transition from the curbside to what we call grab and go, and it provides limited service inside the library. And it's intended to remain stable no matter what tier we're in, and then we're hoping to expand it as we move up through the health tiers. Unfortunately, we had to temporarily suspend the computer service that we had, where patrons would come inside and sign up to use a computer and access online services for 45-minute periods when we went into the deep purple. But as was mentioned earlier too, during that same period, we transitioned to lending out laptops and hotspots to really help mitigate that digital divide that still exists out there. And we were also working closely with partners so that we can get hotspots into community centers, into homeless shelters, and other places so that people can continue to access the internet when they don't have that access inside our libraries. But we do hope to return to that service as we move up the tiers. We also continue to run a very robust telephone service, and this helps patrons access our suite if they have trouble accessing our suite of digital services. They can get tech help. They can also learn how to work their new equipment that we're lending out. And additionally, they can also order books over the phone and have them mailed to them if they are unable to make it to one of those 5 locations that we have the grab and go service. And because it's been such a perpetual kind of sea of changes, we've established an internal communications team to help staff gain greater clarification on questions around safety, on questions around the new services that we provide. And this is made up of every member or every division and every level within the organization so that we can really help clarify immediately on issues of safety and new services that we provide. When we start a new service like lendable tech, everyone then has to become tech support inside the library for our patrons with this new equipment. And so we need to immediately provide new training for staff so that they can answer those questions and do it safely during this period. And I also want to mention too that we paused and we've never stopped running virtual programs either. So we continue to really run virtual programs. And one thing we never suspended was our services to the jails. The state, there's a state mandate for the jails to have library services, and we've continued to work with the county jails on that. And we're one of the few programs that are going on inside the jails. And so we hear from our staff who do that, that there's a great eagerness because it's also a way that people can gain points and gain early release. So it's a really kind of prized, those programs the library runs inside the jails are really quite prized. And we also see those same individuals come back and use the library when they get out, which is great to see. and we are scaling up our services with the bookmobile. This is really dependent on what our partners will allow. And so we're about halfway where we were pre-pandemic in terms of the number of sites that we go to. But we've also added services during the pandemic. You may remember we started meeting families at the school lunch sites across the county and delivering services there. So we've been augmenting the work that we do with the bookmobile and some of the other staff to meet patrons where they are. We also, as you may remember, we paused our work on the strategic plan. We were planning to do that this year, but because of everything that's going on, we decided that we will pick up this work again in the new fiscal year. One goal that we always had for the strategic plan is to build in a more robust plan for delivering equitable services. And so beginning in the late spring, we started a committee internally to look at our services. And we're looking at it through the prism of three areas that are really crucial for this work. One is evaluating our collections and our services to ensure that we're meeting everyone in the community for their needs. We are also have another team that's going to look at recruitment and retention. And then the third piece is looking at the culture of the library and ensuring that we have an inclusive culture. And so that team is already reviewing trainings that we can provide ongoing for our staff and really develop a new lens for everyone inside the organization to review our services. So there is still a lot going on. And then, as I mentioned, we'll pick up that work for the strategic plan beginning in the new fiscal year. And I'm open for questions.
I had a question, Chair Bernal. I know that you mentioned a little bit about the change in programming once the county returns to the red tier. And it looks, the good news is that the data on infection rates and hospitalization rates are all improving over the last couple of weeks dramatically, which is great news. And in fact, our infection rates, I believe, dropped by almost 30%. And so it seems as if we continue these trends that we will be moving to the red tier within the next 2 weeks to a month. What other changes? I know you talked about the computer change in your report, but if we went to the red tier, but what other changes would come about?
So one of those things that we're looking at right now, we have, I would say, two areas, working with our partners and bringing them back. So for instance, it's tax season, or everyone is getting ready to do their taxes. We've had to make some changes there where we have worked with partners to support the patrons with that work. And a lot of our work, especially at downtown, involves bringing partners into the library to work with our patrons on services that we're not experts in. So that's something that we want to continue to look at and expand. And additionally, as I was mentioning, with the tech support, there is, you can sometimes call our staff, and we've been trying to problem solve around this, and they'll talk to you on the phone for an hour to try to solve your problem. And it's something that if you're in person and they can bring it, it takes 5 minutes for us to figure out what the problem is. And so we're problem solving around how we can bring patrons in and have more interaction with them to help them problem solve around those challenges as well. So that I would probably say is the start, is bringing back the inside computer services, providing more personal services when we can, and then bringing those partners back into the library. And we did, for a time when the weather was nice during the summer, we worked with a number of partners outside under a tent. And so hopefully soon then we can bring them inside, because we know that we're going to continue to have challenges with the weather.
And the way the library's restrictions are written, it's a % of capacity of building. So what it really allows us to do is allow more and more people in the building. So we're trying to figure out what services will increase capacity, but without overwhelming capacity, because we don't want to disappoint people and have lines outside. I think one of the things you'll see in the next 3-4 months too is a certain percent of people allowed to do some browsing in the building, but I still think we're going to be controlling the number of people in those facilities.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from board members? Okay, I think the other thing that'll be interesting to see is how people feel just comfortable just being out in buildings, even when restrictions are less limited. That'll be just, there'll be some hesitancy, I'm sure.
And I think we're going to end up over the next several months with a much wider set of expectations, which I think is going to be frustrating. You'll have people who've been vaccinated, want us to open up, want us to do events, and then you'll have a whole group of people who haven't been vaccinated yet. And so I think it's going to create some really interesting customer service challenges.
Yeah.
I also saw that you're challenged from a staffing perspective. So talk about that.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the budget, but we lost about a third of our staff hours in our budget process. On top of that, now we've gone through a significant number of retirements, and then we have a significant number of people that are out with health restrictions. So I have to say that staffing the buildings, even part-time, is a really daily struggle. I'm very appreciative that you gave us the $350,000 and allowed us to hire some of our on-call workers back. And that's really sort of saving us in our ability to close down buildings and open up buildings. But I thought that would be a greater relief than it has proven to be. The thing I'm going to tell you as we move into the budget discussion is we have one more fiscal year really of great unrest. Next year we'll tend to have about 3 buildings closed at any given time, but by FY 2023, the beginning of that, we're going to end up with all 10 libraries open, because the way the downtown project is moving forward is we'll move to an entirely different building. We'll be open as that building is built. So in FY 2023, we'll have all 10 libraries operating. So I think the challenge for this board is going to be one more year of transition, and we're going to need financial stability by FY 2023. And how do we use the next 18 months to transition up? And I'm going to give you one of the dilemmas. We're part of the City of Santa Cruz's human resource system. I went to a meeting with Lisa Murphy, our human resource director. Like I'm sure all of your jurisdictions, they haven't been filling positions for almost a year because of concerns about the budget. But they have over 60 vacancies that as the budget improves, they're going to probably have to immediately fill. And as you can imagine, that office has also taken reductions and isn't going to be in a position to fill those quickly. And so I just am, I think we're all going to be challenged over the next 18 months about how do we step back to more normal times, but achieve our goal of being open in 2023. And with that, we could move to the budget discussion.
All right. Well, first of all, let's, Jamie, you had a question?
I had a comment if we're at that stage yet on this item.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask for public comment.
Okay, yeah, public comment first, then we can.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item?
Chair Burnell, there are no public comments.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'll turn it back to comments and motion. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, so first off, thank you for the update. You know, it's been an incredible challenge, and I know the hiring issue is certainly real, Susan. I'm glad you brought that up, and we can talk more fully about it, I think, when we get to the budget item. My only comment I was just going to make, and this wasn't really touched on in the presentation, Eric, is that in the staff report, it talks about pursuing the development of the downtown library. And I know we've talked about this loosely, but I just want to make sure that we're really clear that, you know, the City of Santa Cruz has their project management team, and as the library will support that, like we did for Felton, like we did for Capitola, but that, you know, we're not leading the charge on the Santa Cruz library. That really needs to be the City of Santa Cruz leading the charge on that one. So that's just, it's a minor wording thing in the staff report, and just make sure that we're all really clear that it isn't the library pursuing the development, it's supporting the development. So that's my only comment. And with that, well, I guess I don't think we need a motion on this one. You want a motion on this one, Susan?
It go either way.
All right, well, I'll move acceptance of the operational recommendations that are outlined in the staff report and presentation.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Palacios,
Yes.
Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Yes. All right, thank you. And with that, we conclude general business items. Next is scheduled upcoming meetings, which are noted here. Next meeting is March 4th at 5 p.m. And
I
then
think we still have a budget item.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I jumped ahead. You're right. The next item is item 10C. Sorry about that, which is the Library FY 2020 budget planning issue. Sorry about that. All right. I'll turn it over to you, Susan.
And the library is starting their budget process for the FY 21-22 budget cycle. There's a series of outstanding issues that we really need to resolve. I think in order for us to do the appropriate forecasts for 22 and 23. And I just wanted to make sure and put on the record. The first is our maintenance of effort negotiations. The Second Amendment of the LFA is 5-year agreement is ending. That agreement basically held the contributions of the county library fund static and increased the City of Santa Cruz's contributions by $70,000 each year. The result of that has been excess funds being held in the library fund account. We believe there'll be $2 million excess in that account this year. I know there is discussion of potentially holding off on determining the new 5-year plan or 3-year plan or 1-year plan. I just would like to say that it has been frustrating when there's funds available for library services and operations that aren't necessarily directly going to the library when in part that they're needed. I know those excess funds have been spent on library projects in the past, especially the county and the Scotts Valley and Capitola projects. I think they were needed there desperately. It was a great use of the funds. But in the future, I'd like to see the Santa Cruz Public Library's share of that being applied to the library's operating budget, because I feel like the library has needs. I'm assuming that Nicole Colburn from the county is leading a group to talk about that, but it would be great to have those discussions concluded earlier rather than later, because it's sort of essential to our long-term forecasting that we understand as a library system what resources are likely to be available. The second thing I want to say is we've taken a really conservative approach to budgeted reserves and fund balances. But I, again, feel like that there are many financial needs of the library, and we have rather significant fund balances at this time. I did provide you the latest dashboard that the city has provided. Right now, what's difficult about this report is that there's two things happening. There's the year end, and there's the results of this past crazy financial years with huge changes in both revenues and expenditures. In February, the City of Santa Cruz will close out the 2020 fiscal year. So then we'll be able to unpack those two things. But if you look at that worksheet, it shows that we have $2.7 million in budgeted reserves, and we have about $3.3 million in fund balance. And I think that considering the library's financial needs right now, those are rather high, especially if you consider the $2 million balance in the library fund as well. I would like to see some of those resources allocated to the library, and I will be coming back in the next several months with requests for the utilization of those resources. Clearly, one of the things that we see that we can unpack is that our sales tax revenue is much higher than our original forecast. These are all good things. The only thing I just want to stress is that the library has significant financial needs. I understand that these are one-time funds. The third thing is we have had this tradition of paying for our overhead from the City of Santa Cruz for both financial services and human resource services. That amount's been $485,000. It was based on a cost study done years ago. We have since inflated it by 5% annually and agreed to do a cost study next year. We've done that for a number of years. I think Kim Kraus, who is the new city finance director, is on the phone. We've had conversations with Kim. She is relatively new and has a lot of things on her plate right now. But I would like to try and get a commitment that we'll likely do 5% again this year, but that we will try and do that cost study over the next fiscal year so that we ensure that the basis of those overhead charges reflect the reality of the services that we're getting. The fourth big issue is the operation and maintenance of capital facilities. In 2017, we brought forward to this board the concept of, we were using a BOMA standard. It's sort of a business operation standard for how much you should be budgeting per square foot for facilities. At the time we were estimating, it was a national standard, so I would guess California should be higher, but it was about $8 a square foot operating, $2 a square foot for a capital maintenance pool. We talked about it in 2018. This board gave us $100,000 one-time funding. That was actually really great because we had some maintenance issues where things were literally just falling apart and we needed to get them fixed. In 2019, we said, could we start building a capital maintenance pool? That would be a capital fund. We were given $50,000. The idea would be that we would raise that amount by $50,000 until we reached $400,000. We did not get that funding last year. We did not seek it because of the state the budget was in. And I know there's a lot of discussion about how maintenance is going to occur. But I think this is something that is important that we resolve. And I guess my request is I really do not want to have multiple approaches to maintenance based upon the jurisdiction. I think it's essential that we create a system-wide approach to maintenance. And I'm very open to whether that is in the library or whether we buy those services from a governmental jurisdiction or even a third entity. But what I would ask is that, the current maintenance approach is some of the jurisdictions do maintenance and some of them don't. And it has really created some really interesting inequalities in the quality of the facilities. The last thing, and I just want to add about the maintenance issue, it has a great impact on our ability to sign the leases we need to sign between the library and the jurisdictions. And so it is something we really need to spend some time and energy on coming to a philosophy. The last piece is hours of operation. In 2017, we had really a very long discussion about how we do hours. At the time, we were looking at a pilot project that expanded hours significantly across the system. And I think in a perfect world, public libraries would be open retail hours. That is 10 to 9, Monday through Thursday, and at least 10 to 5, Saturday through Sunday. The other thing, in a perfect world, each library would be able to offer children's, teens, and adult services and specialized services based upon community needs. We don't have the finances to be able to achieve that. That is when we made the decision to move to regions. And what we tried to do is say, we will cover all of those needs and desires across a region, but not necessarily across a single library. So that each region then suddenly had both Saturday and Sunday services. Each region then had some night, afternoon, and morning hours. Each region had access to a children's librarian, a teen librarian, and an adult services librarian. And it really felt like a very cost-effective way to provide services. The other thing we established at that time was that we were going to consider hours annually. We haven't made a lot of changes to them, but we have, as part of the budget process, approved hours across all the branches. We set a minimum hours at small branches of 36 hours a week. And then we provided that spectrum across hours of the week, days of the week. We also said that we were going to use library use as part of our considerations. So circulation, number of people in the door, number of programs, and that there were some limitations that we have no power over, like a building's capacity. The truth of the matter is, if a building has a program room, they're going to have longer hours because of the nature of the building, as an example. But things like employee contracts also need to be considered because we have the way we staff is limited by our employee contracts. So one of the things that I'm asking is we won't go back to normal hours on July 1st. We are likely to go back to normal hours on July 1st, 2022. And so again, we need to build up the staff and the expectations for what those hours may look like. I have a highly effective library advisory commission. One of the things that you guys have recommended is that that commission be used in part to help us evaluate what community standards are. And in particular, I would like to use that commission to have this discussion around hours of operation. I think it's a great place to get the community heavily involved. With that, I'm going to turn it back. These are big issues. We've actually got a lot to achieve in the next 2 months so that we can even put the budget together.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions from board members?
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Timmy.
Susan, you were making the conversation about the MOE. My understanding was at the, was it at the LIC meeting or at the LFA meeting, the Library
LFA.
Financing Authority, that I think there was a figure floated for what the increase in MOE would be next year?
And my understanding, Nicole, was that it would keep the $70,000. The proposal would be a one-year addendum to keep the City of Santa Cruz increasing by $70,000, and that the remaining entities would remain flat.
My understanding is that it is Nicole Colburn on the call?
Yeah, Jamie, do you want me to chime in? So
Yeah, it'd be helpful. Can you clarify that for me, please?
yeah, so it's a $320,000 increase in MOE. So 70,000 would come from the City of Santa Cruz and 250 from the County Library Fund.
Great.
And that's just on the MOE side. There's additional sales tax as well.
Great. Thank you.
My understanding is that from Nicole that we are trying to finalize language by March and bring it forward to the Board of Supervisors in each of the jurisdictions within the JPA for approval.
Thank you.
And I guess my question would be, the remaining 1.75 million will stay in the library fund?
So
Go ahead, Nicole.
do you want me to explain that? So yeah, that $2 million, that's the excess amount that's being generated in the library fund. So that would be set aside in the library fund. And you know, there would be an opportunity if we sort out what's happening with maintenance or other issues to spend that money, but it would have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors to spend it.
My biggest concern with the remaining library fund balance is that we need to sort out this maintenance issue. And this is a source of funding that at least in the unincorporated area in the cities of Capitola and Santa Cruz Scotts Valley could be used for the maintenance of their facilities. And so we need to come up with a good maintenance plan and adequately fund it. This is a important, very, very important opportunity for us to properly fund the maintenance of our new libraries. And so we need to get it right. And we need to also figure out, you know, who's going to be responsible for that, for the maintenance, whether it's going to be the jurisdictions in some form or the library itself, and then use that library fund balance for that purpose. So it's actually good news. And I think we just need to work on the details of how we get that right.
Martine, I have a question. Okay, along that same line, Susan, you were referencing in your report that there had been prior discussion back to 2017 about some standards. This predates me, so could you go over that a little bit? On May 17th, the library proposed definitions of maintenance. So are there resources, are there best practices for library management standards that I think that'd be useful to hear a bit more about?
Commissioner Friend, yes, I have to say that I don't think that the approach that was proposed is necessarily the very best approach. I just hope the library can be involved in negotiating the approach that is ultimately decided upon.
Okay, and I heard though, I'd taken some notes that you'd written down some recommended dollar figures per square footage. Did I get that right? Is that like an expectation for a capital pool as well as ongoing maintenance for the branch?
And at the time, the expectation was for a typical business building, which is something that colleges and universities use. The difficulty I have with those definitions, honestly, this is complicated stuff, but the difficulty I have with those definitions is that typical business use uses a facility for 8 hours a day relatively lightly. They don't have large public access to a typical business building. I thought colleges and universities would be a good standard because they have that type of heavy public access. But I don't think that this in the public sector has evolved to the place that I'm comfortable saying this is the right approach. And so what I just want to, the point I want to make is that we've been talking about it for a number of years. I do think it's time for us to determine an approach. I'm open to multiple approaches. I just would love the library to be part of that conversation. And to be honest, I am trying to avoid multiple approaches.
I understand that. And I think we share that sense that we have these beautiful brand new or renovated facilities. And we want to make sure that care is taken for them to prolong their beauty and their functionality for the public. Yeah, so I think that we're all, and it's a great timing, I think too. It's no longer theoretical, like it is real, it is present, it is here. And so, yeah, I think the timing is good for that conversation. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions from board members? Any other questions? Okay. So with that, we'll see if there are any members of the public that'd like to comment on this item. Are there any members of the public? Ms. Jones?
Chair Bernal, there is no public comments.
Okay. So with that, I'll bring it back to the board. There is a staff recommendation, which is to review and endorse library budget planning issues. Do you need any kind of motion or direction, Susan, on this?
No.
I think
like you
the board could potentially provide some direction at this stage. It sounds like some guidance, Susan, about the maintenance of effort. You're looking for a little bit of information, and I think at this point there's a tentative plan that it would be $320,000 of additional funding on top of the sales tax increases for next year. Obviously pending approval by the Board of Supervisors and all the other entities in the City of Santa Cruz. But it maybe as a planning figure, we could include that as a motion to say that that's a planning figure. If there's, if that doesn't meet the needs with the sales tax growth, we should hear. I think the board would love to hear that. But as a planning figure to plug into the budget, that seems like it's a good number to use at this stage.
Thank you.
Are you looking for direction on each one of these others, or are these, the approach to budgeting and reserves? From my standpoint, as just one individual director, I would say that, we have our reserves, and that's important. We also have our fund balance, and our fund balance, to the extent that we're allocating it to one-time needs, that's great. That's the purpose for fund balance. A little bit of a cushion there really helps, weather the ups and downs of the economy. But, if we get into spending the reserve, I think that's another question. But the fund balance, I think, from my perspective, is, like I said, one director certainly can be in play. I'm really happy to hear that the City of Santa Cruz is going to do the hard work on the overhead. That's been, I think, ever since we've come up with this current model for the library JPA, it's been something we've talked about. So that's really great to hear. Thank you, Director Bernal, Chair Bernal, for getting that going. And then on the maintenance side, clearly that's going to be an issue. I recall that we had a little subcommittee comprised of, I don't remember who the individual, I thought it was Scotts Valley and Capitola library staff that was working on this a couple of years ago. And I don't think it never got all the way there. So there's clearly a little bit more work for us to do on the maintenance side. And thank you for putting a little bit of pressure on us, Susan, because I think that's something we're gonna have to focus on. And I'm comfortable with looking at recommendations from the LAC for hours of operation. I think that's a great use for the LAC. The hours of operation are always difficult decisions. There's equity concerns between geographic areas. And so I think the LAC is a great place to have those kinds of conversations, ensuring that what we're doing here is we're really looking at things that are fiscally sustainable, that they're understanding that keeping every building open 24 hours a day probably isn't in the cards. Those are all my only comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'd second that motion.
Oh,
Thank you. That's exactly the kind of feedback I need.
Great. Yeah, I would only add just that I think it's, thank you, Susan, for, identifying the critical issues that we have to discuss and sort through. Obviously, we will do that. But in any case, it's all really looking towards, sort of a brighter future for the library. So the big picture is good, although some difficult times here. But it's good to have some options here, and we'll work them through. Some of these we're talking about now, and others we'll sort through as part of the budget process, and others will probably take a little longer, but we'll get through them. And of course, we've got a little bit of time to hopefully get back to normal here as well. So we've got the pandemic aspect of it that is having an impact. So anyway, with that, I'll go ahead and ask that we take a roll call vote. Or actually, did I open? There was no public comment. That's right. So roll call vote, please.
Director Goldstein?
we get an aye yet? I'm sorry, I said it 3 times.
Okay, thank you. Director Palacios?
Yes.
Vice Chair Friend?
Aye.
And Chair Bernal?
Yes. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we can move on to item 11, which is the scheduled upcoming meetings, March 4th, 5 p.m. And then with that, we can then adjourn to closed session. So thank you for all of those that are participating.
I think you're going to come back next month and talk to me. So I'm going to bow out and not wait, if that's appropriate.